Amara Johnson had always felt like she didn't quite belong. Growing up in a small, quiet town where everyone looked the same and lived similar lives, standing out wasn't something people appreciated. Amara's dark skin, curly dreadlocks, and confident stride made her different, and difference wasn't celebrated there. But she never let it bother her too much. Her parents taught her to hold her head high, no matter what others said or thought. They reminded her that being unique was a gift, not a curse. Still, life wasn't always easy for Amara, especially when kids teased her for sounding different or having hair they called weird. When Amara's family decided to move to Chicago for better opportunities, she felt excited, but also nervous. A big city meant new faces, new challenges, and hopefully, a chance to start fresh. On her first day at Lincoln High School, Amara woke up early, carefully braided her dreadlocks into a neat style, and wore her favorite yellow dress. She wanted to make a good impression. As she walked through the crowded hallways, she could feel eyes on her. Some students whispered behind their hands while others openly stared. It wasn't exactly the warm welcome she'd hoped for. One face stood out among the crowd, a tall girl with sharp features and an intimidating presence. This was Tori Reynolds, the school's self-proclaimed Queen Bee. Everyone knew who Tori was because she ruled the halls with a mix of charm and cruelty. She laughed loudly, commanded attention, and wasn't afraid to use insults or threats to get what she wanted. Tori noticed Amara immediately and smirked as if sizing her up. Amara tried to ignore her, focusing instead on finding her classroom. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might be brewing. Throughout the morning, Amara did her best to stay invisible. She sat quietly in class, avoided drawing attention to herself, and kept her answers short during discussions. Despite the whispers around her, she managed to convince herself that things would get better. Maybe tomorrow would be easier. Maybe people would grow curious about her instead of judgmental. But lunchtime proved otherwise. As Amara settled at an empty table with her sandwich, she saw Tori approaching with two friends trailing behind her. The trio stopped right in front of Amara, blocking her view. Tori crossed her arms and tilted her head, studying Amara like she was some kind of puzzle. "So you're the new girl," Tori said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "What's your deal? You think you're special or something?" Amara swallowed hard, trying to keep her cool. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also refused to shrink under Tori's glare. "I'm just here to learn," she replied calmly, looking Tori straight in the eye. Tori raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Learn what? How to stand out? 'Cause trust me, nobody asked for that." Her friends giggled, egging her on. Amara clenched her fists under the table, fighting the urge to say something she'd regret. Instead, she took a deep breath and shrugged. "I don't need anyone's permission to exist," she said softly before picking up her tray and walking away. But Tori wasn't done yet. Later that afternoon, as Amara opened her locker to grab her books, she felt a shove from behind. Her books clattered to the floor and she turned to see Tori smirking again. "Watch where you're going, newbie," Tori sneered before strutting off with her entourage. Amara sighed, bending down to pick up her things. She reminded herself that reacting wouldn't solve anything. She needed to stay calm, stay strong. What Tori didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that beneath Amara's quiet demeanor lay years of training as a Shaolin disciple. Back in Ghana, where she spent part of her childhood, her grandfather had been her teacher. He was a wise man who believed in discipline, patience, and using strength only when absolutely necessary. Under his guidance, Amara learned martial arts forms, meditation techniques, and the importance of controlling her emotions. Those lessons became second nature to her, even though she hadn't practiced them in years. Still, memories of her grandfather lingered in the back of her mind. Whenever she faced challenges, she heard his voice telling her to breathe, to focus, to find balance. And now, as Tori continued to target her, those memories began surfacing more often. Amara wondered if she'd ever have to use what she'd learned, not to hurt anyone but to protect herself. For now, though, she chose silence. She told herself that rising above the bullying was proof of her strength, not weakness. By the end of the day, Amara felt drained but determined. She walked home alone, replaying the events in her head. She knew high school wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she had something most people didn't: a foundation built on wisdom and resilience. Whether she realized it yet or not, that foundation would soon be put to the test. The next few days at Lincoln High School passed in a blur for Amara. She tried to keep her head down, focusing on her studies and avoiding unnecessary attention. But no matter how hard she tried, Tori Reynolds seemed determined to make her life difficult. Every hallway encounter felt like a confrontation waiting to happen. Tori's sharp comments grew louder, her smirks more mocking. It was as if she thrived on making others uncomfortable, and Amara had become her latest target. One afternoon during lunch, Amara found herself sitting alone again. She had chosen a quiet corner of the cafeteria, hoping to escape Tori's radar, even for just a little while. As she nibbled on her sandwich, she noticed Tori walking toward her with her usual posse trailing behind. This time, however, something about Tori's demeanor felt different. There was an edge to her steps, a glint in her eyes that made Amara's stomach tighten. "Hey, new girl," Tori called out before Amara could pretend not to notice her. "You think you're too good to sit with us?" She planted her hands on her hips, glaring down at Amara like she expected an answer immediately. Amara looked up, meeting Tori's gaze without flinching. "I'm fine here, thanks," she replied, calmly, keeping her voice steady despite the knot forming in her chest. Tori let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Oh, really? You don't want to hang out with the cool kids?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only Amara could hear. "Or maybe you're scared we'll figure out you're not as tough as you act." Amara blinked, refusing to take the bait. "I'm not here to prove anything to anyone," she said simply. "I just came to school to learn." For a moment, Tori seemed taken aback by Amara's composure. Most students would have either cowered or lashed out by now, but Amara remained unfazed. That only fueled Tori's frustration. With a flick of her wrist, she knocked Amara's tray off the table. The sandwich slid across the floor, leaving a trail of crumbs and embarrassment in its wake. The cafeteria fell silent as everyone turned to watch the scene unfold. Some students snickered, while others exchanged nervous glances. Amara stared at the mess for a second, then slowly stood up. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Was that really necessary?" she asked, her tone still measured. Tori smirked, clearly enjoying the attention. "What are you going to do about it, huh? Cry? Run home to mommy?" Amara took a deep breath, recalling her grandfather's teachings. "Patience," he used to say. "Anger clouds your judgment." She clenched her fists briefly, then relaxed them. "This isn't worth my energy," she muttered under her breath, grabbing her bag and walking away. The crowd parted as she moved, whispers following her every step. But Tori wasn't satisfied. Humiliation burned in her cheeks as she watched Amara leave unscathed. How dare this new girl act like she didn't care? Tori prided herself on being the toughest person in school, yet Amara's indifference chipped away at her confidence. Determined to regain control, she decided to follow Amara after school. When the final bell rang, Amara gathered her things and headed outside. She planned to take the long route home, hoping to clear her mind with a peaceful walk. But as she turned onto a deserted side street, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Tori standing there, arms crossed and lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Tori demanded, stepping closer. "Nobody ignores me and gets away with it." Amara stopped, her pulse quickening. She glanced around, noting the empty parking lot and lack of witnesses. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, she felt genuinely uneasy. "I don't want any trouble," she said firmly, taking a step back. Tori laughed bitterly. Too late for that. And with that, she lunged forward, swinging her fist straight at Amara's face. Time seemed to slow down as Amara reacted instinctively. Years of martial arts training kicked in, pulling memories from her childhood to the surface. Without thinking, She sidestepped Tori's punch, dodging it effortlessly. Tori stumbled forward, caught off guard by Amara's speed. She recovered quickly, though, throwing another punch, this time aiming lower. Again, Amara evaded it, moving with fluid grace. "What the?" Tori gasped, her anger turning into confusion. "How are you doing that?" Amara didn't respond. Instead, she focused on staying balanced, keeping her movements precise and controlled. She remembered her grandfather's lessons. Defense is key. Never attack unless absolutely necessary. So far, she'd managed to avoid hitting back, but Tori showed no signs of stopping. Another punch came flying, followed by a kick. Amara blocked each one, her body moving almost independently of her mind. Finally, Tori grew reckless. In her frustration, she charged at Amara full force, intending to tackle her to the ground, but Amara saw it coming. At the last second, she dropped low, sweeping her leg out in a wide arc. Tori's feet left the ground and she landed hard on her back with a thud. For a moment, everything went still. Tori lay sprawled on the asphalt, staring up at Amara in shock. Amara stood over her, breathing heavily but otherwise composed. "I didn't want this," she said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "But I won't let you hurt me either." Before either of them could say anything else, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Mr. Thompson, the school security guard, appeared around the corner, his expression stern. "What's going on here?" he barked, looking between the two girls. Tori scrambled to her feet, brushing dirt off her jeans. "Nothing," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. "We were just talking." Amara nodded, choosing not to argue. "It's over," she said simply. Mr. Thompson didn't look convinced, but he motioned for both girls to follow him to the principal's office. As they walked, Amara replayed the fight in her mind. She hadn't meant to use her skills, it had all happened so fast. But now she couldn't ignore the truth. Her grandfather's teachings weren't just memories. They were a part of her, ingrained in her muscles and reflexes. And whether she liked it or not, she was going to have to confront what that meant. Back at the principal's office, neither Amara nor Tori admitted to what truly happened. The adults chalked it up to a typical teenage scuffle and gave both girls detention. But as Amara sat in the quiet room staring out the window, she knew this was far from ordinary. Something inside her had awakened and she couldn't turn back now. After the incident in the parking lot, Amara couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. She replayed every moment in her mind, the way Tori's punches came flying, how she instinctively dodged them, and the look of shock on Tori's face when she hit the ground. It wasn't just the fight that bothered her. It was the realization of how deeply ingrained her martial arts training still was. For years, she had pushed those skills to the back of her mind, focusing instead on school, family, and trying to blend in. But now those memories were flooding back with startling clarity. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Amara decided to talk to her mom. Nia Johnson had always been supportive, but there were parts of their past that remained unspoken, especially about Amara's grandfather. Sitting across from her mother at the kitchen table the next morning, Amara hesitated before speaking. "Mom," she began softly, "do you think Grandpa would be proud of me?" Nia looked up from her coffee cup, surprised by the question. "Of course he would," she replied without hesitation. "Why do you ask?" Amara hesitated again, unsure of how much to reveal. Finally, she took a deep breath and told her mother everything, about Tori's bullying, the confrontation in the parking lot, and how she'd used moves she hadn't practiced in years. As she spoke, she watched her mother's expression shift, from concern to understanding, then finally to something resembling pride. When Amara finished, Nia sighed and reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "There's something I need to tell you," she said gently. "Something about your grandfather, and about you." For the next hour, Nia shared stories Amara had never heard before. Her grandfather hadn't just been a kind man who loved teaching his granddaughter self-defense. He had been a Shaolin monk. He had fled China during a time of political unrest, seeking refuge in Ghana, where he met Nia's mother and eventually settled down. Though he left the monastery behind, he never abandoned its teachings. Every lesson he gave Amara, from meditation, techniques to kung fu forms, was rooted in centuries-old traditions passed down through generations of monks. He believed in balance, Nia explained, her voice softening. Strength without compassion is empty. That's why he taught you not just how to fight, but how to control your emotions, how to find peace within yourself. He saw something special in you, Amara, something powerful. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she listened. She had always admired her grandfather, but hearing these details made her feel even closer to him. At the same time, though, she felt overwhelmed. I don't know if I can live up to that, she admitted quietly. What if I lose control? What if I hurt someone? Nia smiled reassuringly. You didn't hurt anyone yesterday, did you? You defended yourself, that's all. Your grandfather wouldn't have expected anything less. She paused, then added, but if you want to honor his legacy, maybe it's time to embrace it fully. To remember what he taught you and use it wisely. Later that evening, Nia handed Amara a weathered leather journal. Its cover was cracked and faded, but inside were pages filled with notes, sketches, and diagrams written in her grandfather's neat handwriting. There were instructions for complex martial arts forms, meditations for calming the mind, and reflections on the philosophy of Shaolin discipleship. Alongside the journal, Nia placed a wooden staff, simple yet sturdy, polished smooth from years of use. This was his, Nia said, her voice thick with emotion. He wanted you to have it when you were ready. I think you're ready now. Amara ran her fingers over the staff, feeling its weight in her hands. It was more than just an object, it was a connection to her past, a symbol of everything her grandfather stood for. She promised herself she would study the journal carefully, relearning the skills she thought she'd forgotten, and rediscovering the values her grandfather had instilled in her. Over the next few days, life at Lincoln High returned to its usual rhythm, or at least, as close to normal as it could get, after such a dramatic event. Word spread quickly about the fight in the parking lot, though no one seemed to know exactly what had happened. Some students whispered that Amara must have taken karate lessons as a kid, while others speculated that she was secretly some kind of superhero. A few even approached her, asking if she could teach them self-defense moves. Amara brushed off their questions with a polite smile, choosing not to elaborate. At school, Tori kept her distance, though her glares spoke volumes. Amara noticed that Tori's friends avoided looking her in the eye, and the usual taunts in the hallways had died down. Part of her wondered if Tori regretted picking a fight, but another part knew better. Tori wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. If anything, the humiliation of losing to Amara would only fuel her anger. Despite the tension, Amara found solace in her evenings. After finishing her homework, she retreated to her room or the backyard to practice. Using the journal as a guide, she worked through each form step by step, adjusting her posture and movements until they felt natural again. The wooden staff became an extension of her body, helping her channel her energy into precise strikes and blocks. With each session, she grew stronger, not just physically, but mentally. The discipline required to master the forms forced her to focus, pushing away distractions and doubts. Her favorite part of the practice was the meditation exercises. Sitting cross-legged on the grass, she closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, just as her grandfather had taught her. At first, her mind raced with thoughts of school, Tori, and the challenges ahead. But gradually, the noise faded, leaving behind a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. These moments reminded her why her grandfather had emphasized inner peace alongside physical strength. True power, he had said, came from mastering both. One Friday afternoon, as Amara walked home from school, she spotted Tori leaning against a lamppost near the bus stop. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Amara braced herself for another confrontation. But Tori simply turned away, muttering something under her breath. Amara exhaled slowly, realizing that avoiding conflict wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. She didn't need to prove anything to Tori or anyone else. All she needed to do was stay true to herself. That night, as she flipped through the pages of her grandfather's journal, Amara came across a quote he had written in bold letters. A river does not fight the rocks that block its path. It flows around them, finding balance and harmony in every twist and turn. She smiled, tracing the words with her finger. They reminded her of her own journey, not just at Lincoln High but in life. She couldn't control what others did or said, but she could choose how to respond. And for the first time, in a long while, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Amara knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone. Her grandfather's teachings were with her, guiding her every step of the way. As the days turned into weeks, Amara began to notice subtle changes in herself. The hours she spent practicing her grandfather's teachings weren't just improving her physical skills, they were reshaping her mindset. She carried herself differently, now with a quiet confidence that drew attention without seeking it. Her classmates might not have understood what was happening, but they could sense something had shifted. Even Tori seemed to pick up on it, though she masked her curiosity with scowls and muttered insults. At school, rumors about Amara continued to circulate. Some students whispered that she was secretly training for a martial arts tournament. Others joked that she might be part of some underground fighting club. A few even started calling her the Warrior, though Amara didn't encourage the Mai nickname. She preferred to keep her abilities private, knowing that flaunting them would only invite trouble. Still, there was no denying that people treated her differently. Teachers noticed her focus during class discussions, and even the bullies who once teased her kept their distance. But while Amara worked hard to stay grounded, she couldn't ignore the growing tension between her and Tori. It wasn't just the lingering hostility, it was something deeper. Tori's pride had taken a hit in the parking lot, and she clearly wasn't ready to let go of it. Every time their paths crossed, Tori's eyes burned with a mix of anger and frustration. Amara tried to avoid provoking her, but she also refused to back down if challenged. The unspoken rivalry simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to boil over. One evening, as Amara practiced in the backyard, her mother joined her. Nia sat on the porch steps, watching quietly as Amara moved through a series of forms with precision and grace. When Amara finally paused to catch her breath, Nia spoke. "You're getting better," she said warmly. "Your grandfather would be proud." Amara smiled faintly, leaning on the wooden staff. "I hope so," she replied, "but sometimes I wonder, am I doing this for him, or for me?" Nia thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe it's both," she said. "He gave you these tools because he believed in you. But how you use them, that's your choice. You've always been strong, Amara. This is just helping you remember that." Her words stayed with Amara long after their conversation ended. That night, as she flipped through her grandfather's journal, she found a section dedicated to the philosophy behind martial arts. One passage caught her eye. "True strength lies not in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. Only then can you inspire those around you." Reading those words felt like a revelation. For so long, Amara had seen her training as a means of self-defense, a way to protect herself from people like Tori. But now, she realized it could be more than that. It could be a way to connect with others, to show them that strength and kindness weren't opposites, they went hand in hand. The following Monday, Amara arrived at school feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She still felt cautious around Tori, but she also felt less intimidated. During lunch, she decided to sit at a table near a group of girls she recognized from her math class. They exchanged polite hellos, and soon enough they were chatting about everything from homework assignments to weekend plans. One of the girls, Mia, mentioned that she'd heard about Amara's fight with Tori. "I don't know what really happened," Mia admitted, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But whatever you did, it must have been impressive. No one messes with Tori Reynolds and walks away unscathed." Amara chuckled softly. "It wasn't a big deal," she said modestly. "I just stood my ground." Mia raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Well, standing your ground against Tori is kind of a big deal. You should teach us how to do that sometime." Amara laughed, brushing off the suggestion, but the idea stuck with her. What if she could teach others? Not how to fight necessarily, but how to feel stronger. more confident in themselves. Maybe that was the best way to honor her grandfather's legacy, not by keeping his teachings to herself, but by sharing them with others. Later that week, Amara approached Mr. Carter, the gym teacher, with an idea. "What if we started a self-defense club?" she asked hesitantly. "It wouldn't have to be anything fancy, just a way for students to learn basic techniques and build confidence." Mr. Carter looked intrigued. "That's actually a great idea," he said after a moment. "We've had requests for something like this before, but no one ever stepped up to lead it. If you're willing to take charge, I'll talk to the principal and see if we can make it happen." Amara nodded eagerly, excitement bubbling inside her. She hadn't expected such an enthusiastic response, but now that the idea was out there, she couldn't wait to get started. Over the next few days, she worked with Mr. Carter to draft a proposal and spread the word among students. To her surprise, interest was high. By the time the first meeting rolled around, nearly 20 students showed up, eager to learn. Standing in front of the group in the gymnasium, Amara felt a flicker of nerves. She had never taught anyone before, let alone a room full of curious teenagers. But as she began demonstrating simple stances and movements, her confidence grew. She explained each step carefully, emphasizing the importance of control and respect. "Self-defense isn't about hurting someone else," she told them. "It's about protecting yourself and knowing when to walk away." The students listened intently, mimicking her motions and asking questions. By the end of the session, several of them thanked her, saying they felt empowered already. Amara left the gym that day with a smile on her face, realizing she had stumbled onto something bigger than herself. Teaching others wasn't just fulfilling, it was healing. Each lesson reminded her why she had fallen in love with martial arts in the first place. Meanwhile, Tori watched all of this from a distance. She hadn't joined the self-defense club, in fact, she mocked it openly, but she couldn't deny that Amara was gaining popularity. Students who once feared her now gravitated toward Amara instead. Even some of Tori's closest friends seemed impressed by Amara's leadership and calm demeanor. For Tori, it felt like yet another blow to her ego. One afternoon, as Amara packed up her things after practice, Tori cornered her outside the gym. "You think you're so perfect, don't you?" Tori snapped, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Starting clubs, acting all noble. Who do you think you are?" Amara turned to face her, holding her ground. "I'm just trying to help people," she said evenly. "If you have a problem with that, maybe you should ask yourself why." Tori faltered, caught off guard by the question. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a final glare, Tori stormed off, leaving Amara alone in the hallway. As she watched Tori disappear around the corner, Amara felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to carry pain inside you, to lash out because you didn't know how else to cope. And though Tori's behavior was hurtful, Amara couldn't bring herself to hate her. Instead, she resolved to keep moving forward, to focus on the positive impact she could make, rather than the negativity she couldn't control. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, Amara felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The self-defense club quickly became the talk of Lincoln High. Students who had never spoken to Amara before now greeted her in the hallways with smiles and nods of respect. Even teachers noticed the change in her demeanor. She seemed more focused, confident, and willing to take initiative. The club's popularity wasn't just about learning cool moves. It was about the message Amara carried with her every time she stepped into the gymnasium. Strength isn't just physical, she often reminded her peers. It's mental, emotional, and spiritual too. For many students, these lessons were life-changing. Mia, one of the girls from Amara's math class, confided in her after a session. "I used to be so scared of standing up for myself," Mia admitted. "But now, I feel like I can handle things better. Like if someone tries to push me around, I know I don't have to let them." Amara smiled warmly, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. "That's all that matters," she said. "You don't need to fight back physically unless you absolutely have to. Sometimes just knowing you're strong enough makes all the difference." Despite the positive feedback, not everyone was thrilled about the club's success. Tori Reynolds continued to seethe in silence, her frustration growing with each passing day. She hated seeing Amara surrounded by admirers, especially when some of those admirers were her own friends. It wasn't fair, she thought bitterly. Amara hadn't earned their loyalty, not the way Tori had over years of enforcing her dominance at school. If anything, Amara should have been cowering in fear, not leading a group of students with quiet authority. Tori's anger reached its peak one Friday afternoon when she saw her best friend, Marcus, laughing with Amara near the lockers. They weren't talking about anything important, just discussing an upcoming basketball game. But to Tori, it felt like betrayal. She stormed over, interrupting their conversation with a sharp laugh. "Oh, look at this," she sneered. "Marcus, are you seriously hanging out with her now?" Marcus blinked, caught off guard by Tori's tone. "What's your problem?" he asked defensively. "We were just talking." "Yeah, well, maybe you should stick to people who actually deserve your attention," Tori shot back, glaring at Amara. "Not wannabe heroes trying to steal the spotlight." Amara didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she gave Marcus a small smile. "See you later, okay?" she said calmly before walking away. Tori watched her go, her fists clenched tightly at her sides. For a moment, she considered following Amara and picking another fight. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of how easily Amara had dodged her punches in the parking lot. Or maybe it was the realization that brute force wouldn't work this time. That night, as Tori lay awake staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the image of Amara standing tall despite everything. Why did she always seem so calm, so unshakable? Tori hated feeling powerless, but she also knew she couldn't face Amara alone again. If she wanted revenge, she'd need backup and a plan. By Monday morning, Tori had recruited 3 other students to help her ambush Amara after basketball practice. 2 of them were loyal followers who rarely questioned her decisions, while the third was a boy named Jake who had a personal grudge against Amara. He claimed she had humiliated him during a self-defense lesson by pointing out his sloppy form in front of the entire class. Whether or not that was true didn't matter to Tori. What mattered was that Jake was eager to join her cause. The 4 of them waited in the shadows near the school's side entrance, where Amara usually exited after practice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement, they exchanged nervous glances. None of them spoke much, though Tori tried to boost their confidence with whispered threats. "She won't know what hit her," she muttered darkly. "Just follow my lead." When Amara finally emerged, her gym bag slung over one shoulder, Tori stepped forward with a smirk. Well, look who decided to show up," she said loudly, blocking Amara's path. Her accomplices formed a loose semicircle behind her, cutting off any chance of escape. Amara froze for a split second, taking in the situation. Then, without missing a beat, she exhaled slowly and dropped her bag to the ground. "What do you want, Tori?" she asked, her voice steady despite the odds stacked against her. Tori laughed bitterly. "What do I want? Oh, I think you know exactly what I want." She gestured to her friends. "This is for embarrassing me, for making me look weak, for stealing my friends. You're going to pay for all of it." Amara shook her head slightly, her expression calm but firm. "I didn't do any of those things on purpose, and I don't want trouble with you or anyone else." "You don't get a choice," Tori snapped, signaling for her crew to move in. Jake lunged first, aiming a clumsy punch at Amara's face, but Amara sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing his wrist mid-swing and twisting it just enough to send him stumbling forward. Before the others could react, she spun around and delivered a swift kick to the chest of one of Tori's followers, sending him sprawling onto the concrete. The second follower hesitated, unsure whether to charge or retreat. Sensing his uncertainty, Amara locked eyes with him. "You don't have to do this," she said evenly. "This isn't who you are." Her words gave him pause, but Tori shouted angrily from behind. "Don't listen to her. Take her down." Reluctantly, the boy threw a wild punch, which Amara blocked with ease. Using his momentum against him, she swept his legs out from under him, leaving him crumpled on the ground beside his friend. Now only Tori remained. her bravado wavering as she realized she was outnumbered. "Stay back," Tori yelled, raising her fists defensively, but Amara didn't advance. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her posture relaxed yet alert. "It doesn't have to end like this," she said softly. "Walk away, Tori. There's no reason for anyone else to get hurt." For a moment, Tori wavered. Her pride screamed at her to keep fighting, to prove that she was stronger than Amara. But deep down, she knew she couldn't win. Not like this. With a frustrated growl, she lowered her fists and backed away. "This isn't over," she muttered, before turning and running into the darkness, her accomplices scrambling to follow. Alone in the empty lot, Amara took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline fade. She bent down to retrieve her bag, her hands trembling slightly despite her outward composure. Part of her wished she could have avoided the confrontation entirely, but another part knew she had handled it the right way, with restraint and respect. As she walked home, she replayed the events in her mind, reflecting on what had happened. She hadn't sought out the fight, nor had she retaliated with unnecessary force. She had simply protected herself, and in doing so, she had stayed true to her grandfather's teachings. When she arrived home, her mother greeted her with concern. "Are you okay?" Nia asked, noticing the faint bruise forming on Amara's forearm. "Did something happen?" Amara nodded, explaining the ambush briefly. "I'm fine," she assured her mother. "They underestimated me, that's all," Nia sighed, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "You're incredible, you know that? Your grandfather would be so proud of how you handled yourself." Amara hugged her back, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. For all the challenges she faced, she knew she wasn't alone. Her grandfather's legacy lived on through her, not just in her skills, but in the values she carried with her every day. And as long as she stayed grounded in those principles, she knew she could overcome anything.